Just here, it's just a matter of like, okay, the microwave and the stove,
Ah, yeah, I haven't done
and
the oven yet. No, good call.
up, there you go. There you have it. All right. Well, thank you for wearing the cat ears for us today.
I'm all prepared.
Yes, yes, exactly. Is are you just getting into the spooky season, or is there a specific reference here?
This is I actually bought these during lockdown. We had a
The
really long
headphones, right?
lockdown
Your
here. We
kids
were
don't
in
have cat ear headphones?
No, my son is like that's
No. I
really
mean,
sad.
Jason's kids, one of them has to have some cat ear headphones.
Oh, good point. Okay, yes. See, I'm a schmuck. I didn't realize it was part of the headphones. I thought Alex was just like also wearing cat ears for us. So, which
Why not? Why not? Do you
please
know
take this as a compliment. Wouldn't throw me. Wouldn't surprise me. Not one little
I
bit.
love that. Like the best compliment ever. Weirdly
Yeah.
enough, we don't really have Halloween in Australia. It's slowly sort of
Oh,
taken off the last sort of 10 years. Like my son went trick or treating, but it's very,
wow.
supermarkets have realized that they can cash in, but it's really only been sort of the last 5 or 10 years. It certainly didn't exist when I
Wow.
was younger here at all.
Wow.
Really,
Well,
sort of like the best export we have right after like Coca-Cola. So, I mean,
It's really Australia is such a weird place. There was such resistance to it for years, and even now you still meet older people that are like, "Oh, it's an American thing," and it's like, "Well, look, bitch. Firstly, no, it's not. Like, let me give you a little history lesson." Um, but it's like of all of the American things to resist,
right. Right.
how about we take
Exactly.
Halloween but fuck off with the Cold War? How about that?
There we go.
this is
you're
that my point precisely.
right.
Thank
Like
Yes.
we
you.
could have done without Vietnam. We didn't really need to be involved in the Vietnam War, but we'll take trick
Yeah.
or treating. Like
There
just
you
a
go.
Pretty
There you go.
harmless.
weird fucking
Absolutely.
hill to die on. Like strange parochial country down here.
Mike, is your microphone currently connected? Because you sound
It's
like
connected. It was just facing the wrong direction. Is that better?
Oh, that
Yep,
is
there
better.
you are.
That's significantly better. Well done.
Yeah.
See,
I had that moment
we
too where I was like, that seems quiet.
we solved the problem. Okay.
Yay!
Okay. Let's do a podcast then. In 3, 2, 1. One Heat Minute Productions presents Guide for the Film Fanatic, the podcast where we invite a guest to pick one movie from Danny Perry's seminal 1986 film reference book and talk to us about that movie. I'm your host, Jason Bailey, and across the mic and across the country from me is my co-host.
Michael Hull.
Our guest today is really, and I don't say this lightly, one of the best in the business. She is the award-winning author of 10 books, 35 book chapters, tons of essays, reviews, interviews, and co-editor of 5 books. She is also the writer of the documentary 1000 Women in Horror, based on her book, which is currently playing festivals and will stream on Shudder later this year. And she is one of the 5 interview subjects of the new documentary Chain Reactions from friend of the show, Alexandra Philippe. Please welcome the horror nana herself, Alexandra Heller-Nicholas. Hi, Alex.
Hi, team. How's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for coming on. You have been super busy, even for you, so I want to make sure we get all proper plugs done. Let's start with 1000 Women in Horror. Tell us how your indispensable book became a documentary that we're very much looking forward to.
Very much.
It's a long story that I'll make super short, but it's basically before the book came out, I did a Miskatonic Institute of Horror Studies lecture on the project at Fantastic Fest in Austin in 2019.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And it was 2018, and the London-based producer Giles Edwards was in the audience, and the book wasn't out yet. The book didn't come out till 2020, but he came up and he said, "Has anybody optioned this for a documentary yet?" And it's like, "Well, no, because the book's not out, mate." And we started talking, and it sort of took up from there. And MPI in the US got involved, the wonderful Nicola, and she brought on board the Canadian documentary director Donna Davies, who had previously done a sort of half-hour documentary on women in horror in, I think, 2013 called Pretty Bloody. And so we had a team, and Shudder supported us in ways that I can't even describe. They were just incredible. And so supportive of this project. And it's, we worked over COVID. Lockdown went for a very long time in the city that I'm in Australia. So there were delays, but we got there and we're finished. And we had our world premiere in August, and we're playing Sitges and Brooklyn Horror Film Festival. So we're around, and to come to streaming on Shudder very soon. Very exciting.
That is so super cool. I cannot wait to see it. We will bump this episode again when its official release date is set. You are also terrific in chain reactions. And the thing that I like so much about your segment is that it's so much about the tactile experience of watching a movie, how it looks because of the circumstances, the fact that, you like first saw this movie on a faded VHS dupe, and that ends up giving it sort of a new, unexpected, unintended quality. Obviously, you do a lot of work with physical media companies that are painstakingly, restoring and presenting genre films, and that's such a net good. And I don't want to ever imply otherwise. Are we losing those kinds of unique experiences when so many things are so readily available in such perfect condition?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, I'm very much a kind of Gen X child of the video shop. So I saw so many films for the first time, on crappy clapped out videotapes, pan and scanned, really terrible things. But that materiality, and I talk about this a lot in Chain Reactions, becomes a part of my experience and my memory of the film. I'm still the Australian VHS of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is so incredibly yellow. It looks like Wake in Fright. So when I finally saw this beautiful 4K stunningly restored version of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I was genuinely astonished that there were blues and greens in it. I had like no memory of those colors at all in the film. I remember red for blood and yellow. And it was quite a shock to see it look so beautiful. So, I mean, obviously, the archival project, the restoration project is a really majorly significant one. But what I think this focus on materiality does is that it actually opens up the conversation to just to talk about experience and even acknowledge, that the different qualities of a film will actually impact your experience with and your connection with a film. When Alex Philippe was in Melbourne a few months ago, we played Chain Reactions, and then we played after it the full Australian VHS on this enormous, fancy cinema screen with beautiful sound, and it sold out. And I was, we sort of thought we'll stick around for half an hour and see how people go with it, but we kind of expected it to be lots of giggling and kind of irony. Dudes, kind of giggling at how kind of bad it looked, because it's a really clapped out old copy, and you could have heard a pin drop. It was extraordinary, and there was a lot of people there who'd never seen the film before. Something about the kind of the desaturation really made it almost feel more ghostly. It made it feel almost like a found footage horror film. It really added a kind of dimension that is hard to articulate. I think conversations about materiality are really important.
I agree. Yeah. And honestly, I think the solution to this is we should have more, this should be a more frequently used bonus feature. Like the
I got a treat for you? Hold that thought. I can't announce it yet. It's not my announcement to me, but boy, oh boy, do we have something for you.
Fair enough. Okay. We're going to leave that there. All right. Well, conversations about restoration and taking care of our genre cinema seemed like a natural transition into why we reached out to have you back, which is Arrow's new 4K release of a movie that's very close to your heart. So, Alex, what film are we discussing with you today?
Abel Ferrara's Ms. 45.
Every day, on every street, in every city, women are insulted.
The catcalling is such like a great thing to start with because it's so sort of like it gives you an idea of where the movie's going but it's just trailer perfect. It's such a cool idea. I'd seen the movie before, but I'd never seen the trailer until I was pulling it for earlier, and I was like, that's the perfect way you start this movie.
Yeah, it really is.
Are you planning on going with someone?
And then, like, you know, when they sort of move away from that bit, they move to the greasy boss, which is like, yes, great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. This is not a trailer that's hiding what the movie is about, and God bless them for that.
But it's giving it to you. It's giving you the sort of like, you know, some of the things that are really good about the movie, which is the sort of different styles of greasy dude who ultimately you don't really feel very sorry for. And like the movie, the trailer sort of remains more focused on that than on her as the bad guy or whatever. Right?
The centering of the boss, I think, is really important in the trailer and in the film. And that's, you know, we'll talk about it, but that's really tied to what Zoe was wanting to do with this film.
And then you include, you know, one of the best shots in all of exploitation history, which is the nun kissing the bullet.
Kissing the bullet.
I mean, you could have just done that for 45 seconds and I would have watched that movie for sure. Are you crazy?
Yeah. God, what a great trailer. Just, okay. So Miss 45 was the sophomore feature from director Abel Ferrara, or at least the second film he made under his own name, following Mike's beloved Driller Killer. The screenplay was by Nicholas St. John, credited as N.G. St. John. St. John also wrote Driller Killer and several other Ferrara pictures, including Fear City, King of New York, Dangerous Game, and The Addiction. It was shot on location in New York over 4 weeks in November and December 1979 on a budget that I saw reported as $62,000. Alex, that seems impossible. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Either way, pretty fucking impressive low-budget shoot. Mike, what does Danny Perry say about Miss 45 in Guide for the Film Fanatic?
Danny says,
impressive low-budget cult movie with striking, highly stylized direction by Abel Ferrara, a feminist script by Nicholas St. John, and a strong, sympathetic, sexy performance from unknown Zoe Tamerlis, a high school student with a resemblance to Natasha Kinski, Simone Simon, and Bianca Jagger. Tamerlis plays the mute Thana. Thana? It's got to be Thana, right?
Thana.
Yeah.
As in Thanatos.
Why did I just read?
There you go.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Tamerlis plays the mute Thana, a timid, attractive young woman who works in New York's garment district. Raped twice, she kills one rapist and goes out on the streets nightly to kill men who exploit or degrade women. Thana is meant to represent all the women of the world who don't speak out against the daily outrages they are subjected to from men. Bosses, boyfriends, strangers on the street. A constant barrage of come-ons, orders, insults, patronizing conversation. She is the passive female, her job is sewing, who kills a man with an iron, symbol of the stereotypical unliberated woman, signifying that woman's passivity is not unsurmountable. She picks up the rapist's gun, obviously a phallic symbol. She will use a masculine weapon to destroy him and other men. She becomes an angel of vengeance, methodically, savagely, and silently avenging her own abuse. She becomes far more intriguing than other cinema women who have retaliated for their own rapes. With its cold sexuality and violent tone, film was influenced by Roman Polanski's films. The plot and thematic elements seem patterned after his Repulsion, in which Catherine Deneuve plays another beautiful, sexually confused young woman, a beautician's aide. Both suffer sexual harassment going to and from work, both kill men who force themselves on them sexually. While corpses rot in their apartments, both have meddlesome neighbors, both lapse into temporary shock states while at work and become increasingly isolated. But whereas Deneuve becomes paranoid and kills men who enter her apartment, Thana breaks free of paranoia and goes out into the city after male victims. Deneuve goes crazy. Thana, though acting crazy, remains rational. She chooses not to kill her lesbian friend, Darlene Studo, even after she has fatally stabbed Thana, or earlier, her weird landlady's Edith Sherman, annoying male dog, Phil. Her character is sympathetic yet fascistic. However, we don't side with her as we do with Charles Bronson in Death Wish because she scares the living daylights out of us. film has many extremely well done scenes. The whole sequence with Thana in a nun's habit is startling. Much humor and weird yet believable characters. Since the film was made by men, it's surprising how obnoxious every male is intended to be. Only someone like Thana could make them get in line. A real sleeper. Also with Steve Singer, Jack Thibault, Peter Yellen, Albert Sinkus, Jimmy Lane, Ferrara.
Yeah, that was his pseudonym for playing one of the rapists. It is interesting that he uses the phrase "angel of vengeance" in that capsule, because that was, from what I understand, that was the international title of Miss 45. Alex, let's start with personal history. You know, when did you first see this movie? How did it hit you initially? What is your relationship with this one?
So I wrote a book on Ms. 45 I think it was published in 2014, 2015. Oh God, I should be able to remember that. It's about 10 years old. And that came after my first book. That was a couple of years after, and a couple of other books after my first book, which was on rape revenge film more generally.
Right.
And I really came to these films, and I talk a lot in both of these books about my background with these films, and that I really, Ms. 45 in particular, I was very much introduced to by men, almost as a kind of challenge, like on the kind of, in my sort of, early 20s, late teens, as a kind of, are you tough enough to watch Ms. 45 and Faces of Death and I Spit on Your Grave and Last House on the Left, it was sort of like
you talk about this. You talk about this in Chain Reactions. It's one of my favorite parts, like that idea of sort of being asked to run the gauntlet of extreme cinema in a way.
Really, and I lovely young men that I had joyful times with. So I don't mean to frame them as like the enemy, but I think just culturally the way that it was understood was, well, these aren't for girls, these are for boys, and there was sort of like an edgelord challenge, like, are you tough enough? And I think framed in that way, I didn't even know, it's not even a case of whether I liked them or not. It was sort of like this idea that the spectacle was of me watching these films, which is a very strange relationship. We don't often talk about spectatorship in that way, but I was very aware that I was being watched on how I was responding to these kinds of films. And once I got over that, I realized, I think with quite a lot of shock, that rape revenge films in particular, it's like these are for me. These are for girls. These are girls' films. These are for the for the ladies. And I'm very much, like I think everybody who has seen Miss 45, I sort of instantly embraced it and understood it and really cherished it.
So, as someone who literally wrote the book on rape revenge films, help us situate this movie sort of within the lineage and the history of that subgenre.
So this is like a kind of crash course. I will direct your good listeners to my book to buy it. Please, God,
Absolutely.
help me. Please buy
Absolutely.
it. Please buy the book.
Linked in the newsletter.
Right.
Consider it done.
But the short version is that there's a general assumption, even from film critics, that rape revenge films sort of started really in the 1970s in exploitation, North American exploitation films. So I Spit on Your Grave, Miss 45 in 1980, 81. That this was like the birth of rape revenge, which is of course rubbish. I mean, we can go back to, obviously, Last House on the Left was a kind of riff on Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring, which won the best foreign language film in 1960. But even going back to I don't know when. I think it was either 1960, could have even been earlier. But the very, very first episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents is called Revenge. And it's a rape. They don't use the word rape. But it's an extraordinary watch, because it does what we think contemporary rape revenge does, and it sort of subverts and sort of transgresses the idea of revenge itself in a rape revenge context. Rape revenge, of course, goes back to the Bible, goes back to the Old Testament, goes back to Boudica. Like it's a long running classical trope. It's certainly
Greek myth
not specific.
is packed full of it. I mean, like every other story. Zeus is somebody's trying to get revenge on somebody for something Zeus did because they can't go get him, so they're taking it out on the kid of somebody who was raped anyway. I mean, like half the stories.
Right. So I think there's something in our, the human psyche that are drawn to these stories, these sort of primal, primitive stories of violation and vengeance.
Look at how we're all watching the Pelican. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but the lady in France right now who's like, I mean, this has been ongoing for a couple of years. And like, I think if somebody just gave her an axe and just sent her into the prison, I don't think that many people would be upset. Like, there would definitely be some people complaining, but nobody likes those guys anyway. Like,
Right.
it's happening right now. Like, we're in it and in a way, sort of can't read enough of it.
Right.
You pick that up a lot in general discourse, and it's something that I actually find really offensive. But if you go to like Reddit or social media, if somebody is accused as a rapist or some kind of sex offender, it's like, well, they're gonna get their just desserts in jail, and that's the rape revenge imagination. I mean, that's the idea that the rape can be used as a tool for revenge comes straight from this same kind of lineage, this same kind of trope that has a very long history.
Got it. And then so within to that long history, then we get into 70s exploitation, where we also sort of simultaneously have the strand of just the sort of, I guess what Quentin Tarantino calls the revenge-o-matic film, the sort of, the Death Wish, Rolling Thunder, that style of traditionally male. So is that really the sort of the key difference? Is that the angel of vengeance in the rape revenge film is a woman, and it's more typically a man in what we would think of as just a revenge film? Or are there other sort of more subtle differences that we're talking about here?
I think it's a lot of things all coming together. So I think certainly that sort of post-Death Wish mainstreaming of vengeance as a kind of palatable cinema recipe is clearly established and clearly something that these films are riffing on. I mean, Miss 45 is such a deeply cinema literate film. There's references in it there's a very clear reference to Woody Allen's Manhattan. There's a very clear reference to Death Wish. So, Ferrara often, especially at this point of his career, doesn't really get the credit that he deserves for being a film guy. Like he's a film nut. He knows a lot about cinema. But we also have the fact that this is happening at the same time as, the sort of post-second wave feminism in the United States. Is still kind of boiling away. So this was very much in the public imagination. A really good example of this that isn't really talked about, but often even now I find people kind of ridicule or mock the fact that the film starts off with 2 rapes. So Thana's walking home from work. She gets raped once. She gets home. She's raped again. And it's like, oh, that's so silly. Imagine such a thing. It's clearly, from my perspective at least, I've not heard Ferrara talk about this, but in 1974, there was an enormously popular miniseries on television called A Case of Rape with Elizabeth Montgomery. And it was a blockbuster. It was like the classic kind of water cooler moment. Everybody watched it. It was prime time. And if you only know Elizabeth Montgomery from Bewitched, I think A Case of Rape is on YouTube. I strongly recommend you watch it because it's not a rape revenge film, but it really sort of sets the groundwork, I think, to what a lot of American films in particular were responding to in terms of the broader kind of conversation about rape. But in A Case of Rape, Elizabeth Montgomery's character is raped twice. So in Miss 45, I think it's a fairly direct kind of riff on that. And A Case of Rape was enormously, it really kind of brought feminist discourse into the home and to the water cooler, like it really kind of, it was something that everybody was talking about.
Got it. Okay, so let's talk then about Ms. 45 herself. Let's talk about, she's credited in the film as Zoe Tamerlis, but her name was Zoe Lund. Why is there that discrepancy, by the way?
So Zoe married a man called Robert Lund, who
you have it.
I had the enormous good fortune of collaborating with in in my co-producer role for Arrow's newly released Ms. 45. We brought Robert on board because I knew Robert. We have a mutual friend in the Addams family, the filmmakers, the Addams families, Toby Hauser and John Adams and Zelda. And,
nice. Yeah.
I believe that they live near Robert. But anyway, Robert and I kind of came in contact that way. And Robert runs, even now, it's still online, but there's a website, which is zoelund.com, I think it is, or it's basically like an enormous archive of Zoe's her writings, press materials, she was a rigorous writer. She wrote novels, she wrote screenplays, she was an activist, she was an essayist, she was a model, she was a musician, she was an actor, she was a filmmaker, an
Wow.
extraordinary woman. Um, and Robert's website to her is really a kind of an incredible kind of enduring tribute and an archive of that marks her legacy. And you can't really talk about this film, and this is something I talk about a lot in my book, in that you can't really talk about this film and not get into the kind of finer nuances of auteur theory, because clearly it's an
Mm,
Abel Ferrara film, and Abel Ferrara in so many ways ticks the boxes of what an auteur really classically is,
sure.
which is kind of a curious fit because so many of his films aren't really what we think of as kind of proper, quote unquote, proper cinema. Um,
Right.
but Zoe, there's no Miss 45 without Zoe, and Abel would be the first person to say that, even though they had quite a
Yeah.
kind of complicated relationship over the years. Zoe, of course, unfortunately passed away quite young.
Hmm.
But I believe that the screenplay itself was only something like about 5 pages long, because
Right.
there's no dialogue.
Right.
There's just no dialogue in it. So I understand that she was like a young woman. She was going to protests, and she sort of randomly was invited to audition for Times Square. And she didn't even have
Okay.
headshots. So she just went to like a photo booth and just got photo booth photos and turned up. And she's like 16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
And the person who was casting Times Square was like, this girl is weird. There is no way we can use her for this film, but she is incredible. My friend Abel's making a film. I think you should go talk to my friend Abel. And by Ferrara's own account, they met, and he was like, this is Thana, that this is her.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible performance. It's essentially a silent movie performance because she's playing a mute. She telegraphs isn't the right word, but she communicates the character's entire interior journey without saying a word. Um what she had, I assume, like no real actor training. She just this came this naturally to her.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
she was. I understand that in terms of her relationship to the arts, she was primarily focused on music.
Mm.
So she was a classically trained musician, I believe. But her
Oh
mother
wow.
is her mother was quite a famous sculptor. So she very much came from a kind of arts world. But most of her energies, she was sort of radicalized even at this young age. There's photos of her being arrested in protests. She was a very, and I think that this is really something that seems to mark the people that knew her personally when she died, is that she was so present in the world. She was so
Mm.
actively present in the world, even at this extraordinarily young age. So,
Hmm.
she came to Ms. 45 with a very clear ideological agenda for what that film and what that role meant to her, even at that young age. So I think that she was driven not merely by questions of craft, but really
Mm.
fundamentally of politics, in a way that was perhaps quite
Hmm.
different to what was driving Ferrara at the time.
Hmm. Fascinating. Fascinating. Okay. So, Mike, what is your relationship with this one? I realize I didn't ask what your history is with Miss 45.
I want to say we watched it for Fun City, right? Either the
I
book or at least the show, but I think the book.
I saw it. There was a series at Quad Cinema while I was first starting on the book. That was New York Women was the name of the series, and
I
I
went to a
saw.
bunch of those with you.
Yeah.
I feel
So
like
you
I
were.
went to several of those with you, and this was probably one of them.
Yeah. That was so I got to see it for the first time, like properly projected in a cinema. After, I think, sort of hearing about it, not necessarily in the same way that you're talking about, Alex, in terms of its extremity, but I don't think I was fully prepared for the artistry of this thing. I went in really from the things I had heard and when you look at, the poster art and the video boxes, the way that it's sold as a pretty conventional exploitation movie. And so to be sort of astonished the way I was, even as someone who had seen Ferrara's later films and knew what a gifted filmmaker he was, just by what he's pulling off here with really limited resources on an extremely low budget. And you can see how this movie sort of propelled him to kind of the next level, at least of independent filmmaking, just based on what he's able to do with it in that with such limited resources and short amount of time. I understand they were shooting out in the streets of New York, guerrilla style, without
No permits.
permits.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can tell, and that energy translates to the frame. It has that kind of run and gun momentum to it. No?
Well, no, I think we watched it again for Very Good Year. And so like the first time we watched it, we were having a conversation about New York, about, the whole concept of that book. The initial sort of core concept of the book was Lindsay passes this law that makes it easier to shoot in New York, and then for the next 15, 20 years, people just make movies about how shitty New York is. So like it's this sort of like the backfiring of this, this sort of idea, right? Was really, and so I watched the movie thinking of it in that way, and I'm sort of coming out of it like, well, it seems like New York was pretty safe if you're not a fucking asshole. I really enjoyed it.
They should have that up at the airport. That's amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's still basically true.
Sure.
So like we're watching it in the sort of the context of that, of like shitty New York movies. And then so it's sort of like that was the lens I originally watched it through. And then we watched it again for Very Good Year. It was more sort of in that era, and it was more sort of being able to sort of like watch it for its own sake, and a little bit less sort of buried in a series of other movies or in a series of other thoughts that I was already having, something like that, right? And so I think the second time it was a lot more able to see like the difference between this and Death Wish. Because we're like talking about Death Wish, we're like, we're going through all that stuff, and so you can put these two movies, this and Death Wish, together, and just sort of thoughtlessly watch them and move on. But and I think I did a little bit more of that the first time. The second time, I really was able to be like, oh no, this is sort of intellectually completely different, and also doesn't involve all of the sort of you call it sexist if you want, but it seems real. It doesn't involve all the like sort of racist tropes and all the right-wing fucking bullshit that's all layered throughout that movie. And there's also a moment in this one he gives you where the one guy is kind of a douchebag, but he does seem to be bringing her bag. He seems to be not going to actually assault her in the alley. Who knows where it was going to go, but that's the way it's presented, right? And so you have this moment in this movie, which you don't have in hardly any of these ever, where there's this sort of moment for her, but it's really more for you. She gets over it pretty quickly. But where the audience sort of has a moment to say like, damn, like, I can't necessarily feel as good about that one as I did about the other ones, That guy with the iron, fuck that guy. I'm not losing a second of sleep over that guy,
Right.
And I think
Sleazy
that's another
photographer,
thing
who cares? Yes.
Fuck him, right? Like,
yeah.
So I think that's another thing that I didn't necessarily catch on the first time I saw it, that the second time was way more present. Hints to her sort of craziness.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There's a wonderful line, and I've forgotten the critic. I think it's on an online piece about Ms. 45. So my apologies to the person who coined this phrase. But it really stuck with me. Somebody described Ms. 45 as almost like a documentary, as close as you could get to a realistic documentary on pre-Giuliani New York.
Yeah.
And it really taps into Ferrara's own kind of the way that he makes films. He kind of once, half jokingly, but I suspect also not in that weird Ferrarian way, he said that Driller Killer was a documentary about a friend of mine. Like,
right.
There's a lot there to unpack. But of course, he's, Ferrara's made incredible documentaries in the years since. He made a lot in the sort of late 2000s, early 2010s. Last year, I think he did an amazing documentary with Patti Smith on war. So, he's got this strong documentary, like formal documentary background. But it's interesting that this word documentary comes up time and time again, talking about Ms. 45 and even talking about Driller Killer.
Yeah.
I think that there is this sort of, it's beyond realism. You know what I mean? There's something there. There's a kind of electric authenticity, maybe is the word that I'm
Yeah.
after.
No, the thing that I found myself sort of aware of again, that obviously I made note of when I was watching it for Fun City, is all the trash in the street. Like the scene where the guy's chasing her with the bag, there's just like, it's just lined with garbage. And it's like, well, I know they didn't dress that. I know that's just like the shitty neighborhood that he was shooting in. I do want to go back very briefly to this Death Wish comparison, because one other element that I think they diverge sharply, and this is not solely informed by some of the things that we were told about Michael Winner, the director of Death Wish, is that it strikes me as really interesting that of the two films, if you are comparing them in terms of categorization, well, this is, a low budget, independent genre film. It's an exploitation movie. It's released by a company you've never heard of before or since. Death Wish is a big, glossy, Paramount release with a major movie star above the title, et cetera, et cetera. And yet I don't think I would have a moment's hesitation to tell you which film has a rape scene that is more exploitative, more gross, more stomach churning from the standpoint of a director who's clearly like getting off on shooting this scene. Whereas the rape scenes in Ms. 45, I think are, visceral, terrifying, scary, and really, identification with the victim, as opposed to the way that Winner frames, to where we're almost like he's putting us into the eyes of the perpetrator. I don't know.
They're also over by
No,
13 minutes. I clocked it. They're 13 minutes in. She's done taking any fucking shit. And you've got another like hour and 15 of this movie left to go and work with it. And that's another thing I didn't really notice even until watching it today, or, watching it for this one, is like because, my wife hates this shit. She'll watch the back half. My wife is not watching the front half. Like, and I just know that about her. She ain't going to see it. I don't even want to talk to her. She doesn't want to talk about it. Fine. So when I'm watching things like this, I will sometimes clock, like, where will I start it for her if we ever watch this? It's like minute 13 in this movie, and most of them spend 73 minutes. They spend another fucking hour doing this before she finally picks up the apple. And I didn't notice that before ever until today, too. And that's a great thing about this movie. I'm good. 13 minutes, you made your point. The second guy doesn't even get the job done, and fuck him. Like, to me, like, I got it. Keep going.
Right.
The Death Wish kind of parallel, I think, is really important because obviously this film is clearly riffing on it, and it's clearly riffing on Taxi Driver. It's clearly, as I said, it's clearly riffing on things as random as Manhattan, a case of rape. So it's a lot more intertextual than I think it's often given credit for. The thing I think that makes, if you just even in terms of the mechanics of the rape scenes of Death Wish, when you watch the Death Wish, the camera is quite far back. So you get the big picture of the room and you get to see all the action going on. Whereas Ms. 45, it's really close up. It's really like so much of that sequence. It's not even the length of the scene, but so much of it is focused on her reaction and her face, rather than the action itself. And it's, there's obviously kind of ideological readings that are kind of attached to both of those. I really love Charles Bronson. He's probably my favorite actor, like unironically. And I think that the reason why I really like the Death Wish films is that I think that his performance in a way kind of runs in opposition to the ideology of Michael Winner in that first one. And I think that there's an ambivalence to Death Wish that I really like. And I think it is this tension between Bronson's performance and Winner's direction that makes it such a fascinating watch. But even just more in terms of nuts and bolts mechanics of rape revenge film, what Death Wish really typifies is something that even now is very common, which is the rape revenge film, which is kind of predicated on the agent model. So, Virgin Spring is this as well, that, that somebody, usually a woman or a girl is raped and often murdered, and somebody takes on the onus of vengeance on her behalf, almost always without her asking. So there's already questions of gender and power. So, like, oh, my wife was murdered, I will take vengeance for her. Well, did the wife want that? that's,
Right.
this is your decision, buddy. What is so interesting about films like Ms. 45 and before it, and I think, it's a nasty film, but I think I Spit on Your Grave obviously predated
Right.
this, even Thriller, A Cruel Picture. What makes these films so interesting is that we start to see women acting on their own behalf, women making their
Right.
own choices and acting as their own agents. And that's
Right.
actually quite radical. And we see this very interesting thing around this point where that's actually happening more in exploitation film than is in mainstream cinema during this particular period. So the more mainstream rape revenge stories are very much about an agent, and that agent is usually a man acting on a woman's behalf. What we have in these supposedly nastier, grottier, sleazier
Right.
exploitation films, and obviously, it's just because, a hot chick in a nun's habit toting a gun, shooting down rapists is a great spectacle for exploitation film. So I'm not
Sure.
saying that there's like an ideological drive behind these films, but motivation aside, it obviously is a big difference between a woman
Yeah.
acting on her own behalf and a man acting on her behalf without her asking. Big difference. So I think this broader conversation of these kind of dynamics about agency and gender and ideology and rape revenge, this film is a really important part of that conversation with something like Death Wish.
That is fascinating. That is really fascinating.
That's why you got to write the book.
Right.
Exactly.
I love it.
To that end, then, we sort of asked you to situate it in the sort of the lineage and the prehistory and sort of what's leading up to this. What do we sort of see in the aftermath of Ms. 45 within the subgenre? In what ways, what is it influencing? How is it impacting this particular subgenre? Sort of where does the rape revenge film go from here because of Ms. 45?
It's interesting, and that I think that rape revenge, I think for me, and there's a lot of like really boring academic discourse about this that it's my autistic obsession, and I tend to nod off while reading it. But about is rape revenge a genre? Is it a subgenre? I'm of the mind that it's a trope because it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Sure.
Like you can't. It's. I think that it's. When we talk about exploitation rape revenge films, we tend to think of it in a generic sense, or that rape revenge is like a subgenre of horror. But when you start actually watching these films en masse and in bulk, they just resist generic classification. You get everything from Promising Young Woman to The Virgin Spring, to the science fiction film Steel and Lace, to Pepe Le Pew, as I argue in my book. I argue very strongly. My first exposure to rape revenge film was Pepe Le Pew, the episode when Penelope gets in the stink and gets the white paint on her back, and Pepe's in the perfume, and she's like, "Hey, baby." Classic rape revenge scenario. So, Maleficent, the Angelina Jolie film is a rape revenge film. I mean, I think that it's so messy and elastic, and so many episodes of things like Law and Order SVU. You know what I mean? Like kind of rape of the week, kind of. Rape revenge. Kind of that recipe, it's adaptable. I mean, there's a Lady Gaga video that's clearly, Rihanna did a rape revenge music video, it's
with
everywhere.
Mads Mikkelsen, right?
It's kind of everywhere. So the legacy is for me not direct. I mean, obviously there are rape revenge nunsploitation films, which are clearly, beholden to Ms. 45. What I think, though, for me, without kind of rejecting your question, is that I think that that its legacy is much bigger. In that, in terms again to this question of who gets to act on a survivor's or a victim's behalf. And this idea of centering women as their own agents of vengeance, I think that's really the legacy, because I think films like Thriller, A Cruel Picture, and I Spit on Your Grave, they didn't quite get the mainstream acclaim that Ms. 45 did. So even now, you'll come across critics who are like, I hate these films, but I love Ms. 45. Ms. 45 is almost always the exception to the rule, where people
Right.
like these films are all disgusting and offensive and ideologically corrupted, except for Miss 45. There's something about this film that
Mhm.
cuts through in ways I actually think that it is unlike any other rape revenge film at all, whether it's mainstream or not.
All right, friends, let's talk about the release and reception of Ms. 45, which opened in New York City on May 15th, 1981. Also opening on that day, Happy Birthday to Me, with its memorable poster imagery, Beyond the Reef, A Second Chance, and The Fan, along with a sneak preview that weekend of the forthcoming The Four Seasons. Also playing in NYC that weekend, this is a good run, Atlantic City, Friday the 13th Part 2, Tess, The Postman Always Rings Twice, The Last Metro, Kill and Kill Again, Airplane, The Devil and Max Devlin, This is Elvis, Heart-Worn Highways, and Thief. So you had a lot of good choices at the movie theater that weekend. Mike,
It's
what
hard
were the
to fuck
news?
up.
It is. It really is. What
Throw
were
a
the
dart.
news headlines on that day?
Friday, May 15, 1981, and the top story on the front page of the New York Times is about Congress passing a budget. So none of us would even understand how to read that article anymore.
Just dusty. No idea. What are they
that
even talking about?
shit is written in Middle English or something.
Yeah.
I don't even know what they're talking about. Reconciliation? What's that? So that's a long word, bro. We don't write like that anymore. Another wild story of days gone by is Below the Fold, in a story about President Reagan's son Michael quitting his job because there were accusations he was using his father's name and position to generate income for his company.
What?
Middle English, bro. I don't even know what you're talking about anymore.
How sweet, how naive.
How fucking quaint. Yeah, yeah. Oh my God.
Now that we're all suitably depressed.
Yeah. It's
You
fine.
could tell me he was wearing blackface, and I'd be like, but he's not all bad. The Pope.
Other
had
happy
been
days. Yep.
The Pope had been shot a few days before, shot Miss 45 style, and I would say at least half of the A section of the New York Times is devoted to the story. Who did it? How? Why? There's at least 1,000 words on the risk of infection in the wound. In the fucking New York Times, he had the best medical care on earth starting immediately. So I'm sure someone's keeping an eye on that. But the Times wanted you to know how basic medicine works now that it was being applied to J.P. Deuces, God's own representative on earth. And finally, in Galveston, Texas, a judge issued a preliminary injunction against various white fishing professionals and their friends in the Ku Klux Klan who'd been harassing Vietnamese fishermen for taking all the shrimp in the Gulf of Mexico, I guess. Whatever. It doesn't matter what their specific beef was. They were just being racist fucking shitbag bullies.
Okay, this feels more familiar.
Say it with me, everyone. Thank Black Jesus we didn't have to deal with that ever again.
Yes,
Jason, what did critics have to say about Miss 45?
At the New York Times.
Fuck the 80s, bro. Every time we do a movies from the 80s, I'm like, people are nostalgic for this shit. I lived through it. It was terrible.
Yeah.
It was terrible. Terrible.
I mean,
at least there were some decent movies because the world was fucking awful. This is your first dictator? Sorry.
It does always give us the opportunity to remind people of how much of our current woes are the result of Ronald Reagan and how woefully dishonest it is to have all of these Reagan Republicans now who are like, oh, I'm against Trump. Well, fuck you. You weren't against the guy who got us here. Okay, sorry. At the New York Times.
At least make this guy live up to that guy's standards. Like, can
There we go.
this is not what this show is about, Jason.
It's
That
not.
was my fault. I'm going to take the blame for that one.
Janet
What did
Maslin.
critics say about Miss 45? Back on track.
At the New York Times, here's Janet Maslin. Quote, the regrettable thing about Miss 45, which opens today at the Rivoli and other theaters, is that it has been freshly and interestingly directed most of the way through. Abel Ferrara, whose other feature was called Driller Killer, has a tin ear for dialogue and an evident penchant for ludicrous material, but beyond that, he is clearly a talented fellow. One can only hope he finds something else to make movies about very soon. End quote.
How are you going to bitch about the dialogue in Miss 45?
There's very little of it, so I don't know.
That's my point.
Maybe that was the issue. Other critics were even more hostile. Lorenzo Carcaterra in the New York Daily News opined, quote, "It's not fair to say that this film was made on a low budget. It's safer to say that it was made on a Chase car loan. The story is stupid, the acting is third rate, and the direction is non-existent. With all these things going for it, I don't doubt Ms. 45 will take in a small fortune," end quote. You know what? All right. Proved you right, bitch. This one was surprising. Alex, I think you'll agree. Maybe I'm not as well read in this as I thought I was. In his Sleazoid Express, noted grindhouse connoisseur Bill Landis wrote, Ms. 45 was made by Abel Ferrara, who's responsible for the abominable Driller Killer. While this film is at least watchable, it still seems that Ferrara gets serviceable ideas and then fouls them up. He concluded the film is very pretentious, lacks enough graphic violence, and is full of creaky plot machinations and irritating characters. It's also visually murky and ugly, end quote. I've seen some of the shit that Bill Landis praised. I don't know where he's coming from here.
That had to be misfiled. That one got misfiled under the wrong titles. There was a mix-up.
Ferrara's got such an interesting relationship to exploitation film. There's a quite famous Ferrara quote where he says all films are exploitation films.
Right.
Like all films are made for exploitative reasons. And if the filmmakers don't admit to them, then they're lying, basically. And I've always, like, to me, that's almost like the ultimate Abel Ferrara quote. Like all films are exploitation films. And I love it. I really love it because I think, this is somebody who's won prizes at Venice and Berlin. He's made highbrow art films and hardcore pornography across his career. And, I struggle to think of many other filmmakers who have really run that gamut, who've really kind of bookended the spectrum quite in the same way that Abel Ferrara has. Maybe Lars von Trier, but there's kind of haziness about his hardcore work. So whereas Ferrara, you can find his official first film was Driller Killer, but of course he made the feature 9 Lives of a Wet Pussy before that, in which he also starred in.
I wondered if we were going to get to hear that in Alex's accent at some point in the show.
G'day, 9 Lives of a Wet Pussy.
But yeah, like I have that Blu-ray. Like he's not. Right.
It's a great film
at all.
It's a really great film. It's funny. You can go back and find. I'm not going to name the author because they put a lot of work into their book. But there's a book on Abel Ferrara that was written before Ferrara copped to making that film, and there's an entire there's pages dedicated to, of course, the great Abel Ferrara. Direct descendant of Godard. He would never make hardcore pornography. And there's a chapter in the book on Ms. 45 that literally doesn't talk about rape revenge until the last paragraph. Like it's this desperate attempt to squish Ferrara into this sort of highbrow auteur, kind of reverent, like the Godard thing all the way through. It's like, he's the new Godard. And it's like, dude, he actually did make 9 Lives of a Wet Pussy, and he's kind of, he kind of denied it for years, and now he's like, whatever, it's a thing that I did. I think if you know his work well and you're not fucking hung up, like if you just relax a bit, there is an auteurist thread going from those early shorts, going from the early porn to Driller Killer to Ms. 45 through to stuff like Siberia and The Addiction and Tommaso, it's all Abel Ferrara. There's such a distinct Ferrarian. I mean, he's my favorite director, my favorite living director, certainly for exactly that reason. But I love the kind of brutality of, all films are exploitation films. I don't think Ferrara would consider his more recent, supposedly more highbrow work as any less exploitative in that sense than, than his sort of earlier work. So I think that I really like how he kind of deconstructs and transgresses all of these kind of hierarchies that we have in place. And like you said, it's not just highbrow mainstream film critics who have these kind of anxieties. It's also often quite highly regarded and quite good. Trash exploitation critics as well. It's Ferrara is a kind of tricky case to get your head around.
He is.
Well, and we got to start thinking too, like Godard wasn't eating ass between cigarettes and croissants. Like he just wasn't making movies about it. But this sort of idea that like somehow a person can't contain you know, sort of high and low thoughts all in the same. You can have philosophical thoughts while you're eating this. I don't really understand why this is a problem.
In The Village Voice, Jay Hoberman ventured, quote, Ferrara has no particular talent for suspense, but he keeps the film moving with a good eye for locations, a raunchy sense of visual wit, and a cartoonish appreciation for Midtown Manhattan street life. And Variety granted, quote, by keeping the picture short and busy, Ferrara makes its far-fetched elements play. His shock material works mainly by suggestion, but there are enough gross elements, they put gross in quotes, there are enough gross elements to separate thrill-seeking viewers from traditionalists. How did it do in terms of box office and awards, Mike?
So weird. That's so weird. I just like, we live in the post-film guide for the film fanatic world where it's not a big deal to like, yes, you know, to like whatever, Joan of Arc and Driller Killer all at the same time, and like be able to like have that in your head and understand that, and that's okay. Like it's just hard for me to remember when that wasn't okay.
Right. I mean, even now, you know, whenever like nothing is like, nothing boils my piss more than the phrase guilty pleasure. It's like, I'm guilty because I wasn't nice to my mum all the time, and I should have been. You know, I'm not guilty because I like Driller Killer. Like, I'm fine. Like, oh my God. Like, you know, find your joy where you find it. Like, oh my God. Like, imagine being uptight imagine feeling, you know, shame about the things that you find pleasure in. Like, geez, relax.
All right, Mike, box office and awards.
We have no box office reporting available for Miss 45, Jason, which maybe isn't a surprise for a low-budget independent exploitation from the early 80s, but it presumably made a healthy profit since Abel's next gig was the much bigger, much more expensive, name-actor-filled Fear City. And the only award of note was the nomination for Best Low-Budget Film at the 1981 Saturn Awards.
I will say this, every time the Saturn Awards come up on this show, I'm like, bully for you, Saturn Awards. Like, there are so many great movies that because they're genre movies, that's the only award or nomination we get to talk to at the end. And it's like, you know what? Doff of the cap to the fucking Saturn Awards.
And in a busy year, shout out, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm sure the Saturn had plenty of things to look at in 1981.
81 was a big year for genre cinema.
Right.
Good for them. Good for them. All right, now it's time for a segment we call Double It Up, where we each select one movie that we think would make an ideal double feature with today's focal film. Alex, you're our guest, which means you go first.
I would go, it's an obvious one perhaps, but Bad Lieutenant. Ferrara's film Bad Lieutenant, which was co-written by Zoe, stars Zoe in an extraordinary cameo. Continues
disturbing cameo, right? Disturbing cameo.
Continues Ferrara's fascination with Catholicism and Catholic imagery. It's often talked about as his like Catholic trilogy, so that there's Ms. 45, Bad Lieutenant, and his film Mary, about Mary Magdalene. Another film that I would love to add to this, but because Zoe died, we don't have it. But I do want to kind of mention this in case people aren't aware of the fact. So Ferrara did a Pasolini biopic with Willem Dafoe in the role that he was born to play.
Absolutely.
That project had been in development for a really long time, and Ferrara and Zoe had talked about it together often, to the point that Zoe was meant to play Pasolini in an early version of the film.
Wow.
And it's like, I mourn this great woman's loss for a whole lot of reasons, that amongst them. So I would ideally, you know, in a perfect world, I would say Ms. 45 and Pasolini, starring Zoe Lung as Pasolini. We don't have that, so I'll go Bad Lieutenant.
Fair enough. You know, and Bad Lieutenant, also an interesting, because now my wheels are turning, all the smart shit you put in my brain in this conversation. It's like, oh right, that's a rape revenge film with an agent where the victim specifically says, I do not want you to avenge this, and he's gonna fucking do it anyway. Wow. Okay. All right. Just blew my mind a little tiny bit. My pick, I'm gonna go with another really intense early 80s grimy grindhouse artsy incredible exploitation flick, which is Bill Lustig's Maniac. I think of these movies kind of in the same breath, just mostly stylistically. You know, it's a far less sympathetic protagonist, far less. But the degree to which both Ferrara and Lustig are out there in the gutters of New York in its grimiest era, grabbing these locations, putting these things in place, riffing on what's happening in the city. The way that Maniac works as an urban horror movie in a way that a lot of the great horror movies of the 80s are suburban or rural horror movies, and this one is so steeped in the city, in the terrors of the streets and the subway platforms, and couples parking in a movie made like 3 years after Son of Sam. I think of them as sort of capitalizing on that same sort of dread that I can only assume was in the air in New York in this era. So that's my double feature.
They're also both really sad. And I think that that's something that's really, like, I love Joe Spinell and I love
Absolutely.
Maniac. And I think the thing that always keeps me coming back to that film is that it's just so tragic. And so is Miss 45. Like, that final scene is so sad. Like, it's a really unusual vibe, I think, for an exploitation film. Tragedy. Like, this real sense of loss and sadness. Beautiful films. Awful films, but beautiful films.
Exactly. Well said. Mike, what do you got?
I was thinking about this and I was like, I've seen I Spit on Your Grave enough times. Let me look around and see if there's a more recent film that sort of fits the idea. And I watched for the first time ever just a movie straight up just called Revenge from 2017. And I had never seen it before, and I was just like, I read like a half a sentence of a review from one person who I already know that I like and respect, and I was like, that's enough. I don't need rest. Like, you wouldn't even write the half of that. You're a smart person. You didn't even write that half sentence if it wasn't a good movie. Holy shit, that movie's good. I mean, it gives you everything you want from a revenge movie, from a rape revenge movie, everything you want from an exploitation movie. It gives me all the things that I wanted. But in addition to all of those things, it's directed by a woman, and there's, when we talked about, the actual assaults in Miss 45, the assault in this, in Revenge, you actually spend more time with one of the other guys who's there, who knows it's happening. He sees it happening. And then he consciously makes the choice to leave, to just walk away and let it be. And you actually spend as much or more time with him because he can hear it. And you you see reflections in the windows and stuff like that, right? So then when she goes after this motherfucker later, there's this very distinct thing because it's she's there with 3 guys. This all happens pretty early in the movie. I'm not pissing away the movie right now. She's there with 3 guys. One of them commits the assault. One of them walks away. And the third one is the guy who brought her there. And when he finds out about it, he tries to give her money and say everything's going to be okay. Right? So now when she goes after these motherfuckers, it's not just the guy that did it who is receiving the revenge. She is placing complicity on the same level as the assault. She's also placing the cover up. This is the guy who brought her there is married, so he's not covering it. He's not giving her money for her. He's giving her money so she won't go tell his wife. It's hush money, right? So they are placing complicity and the cover up in the exact same sort of moral universe.
Right.
Now they do some other shit later where they earn the torture that they receive. But initially, conceptually speaking, you're putting support of the assault at the same place as the assault. And I feel like that's something I don't know if I've ever seen before. And I don't even know if I know that was in the conversation in feminism in 1981, but I don't know that it was really sort of in the general conversation.
The question
until recently.
The question of spectatorship within the worlds of rape revenge is really interesting. So a really key film that predates that is The Accused.
Right. I was going to say that.
Much of The Accused is about the people who watched are just as guilty as the people that performed. And that really there's a very kind of meta thing there where it kind of shifts the conversation to us as an audience watching these things. But so Coralie's very literate and she's very aware of these conversations. But what she does in Revenge that's so powerful is that she boils these down to their essence, a really kind of pure exploitation film essence, where we just have these, it's very few characters, it's one location, it's just like you said, it's stylistically and formally put together in such a confident, intelligent way. And
The craft is impeccable.
I mean, and I think that, I think that she, people talk a lot about obviously the Revenge and the Substance as being, these kind of, these amazing films in terms of the kind of the concepts and the themes, which they are, but just as a kind of nuts and bolts filmmaker, like she's very savvy, very, very savvy. And I don't know whether she gets the kudos that she deserves.
Well, that's what I mean is like the movie is just gives you everything you want on a visceral exploitation. I just like driller killer kind of level. But also if you don't have to, it's all right there. Like it's, all of the intellectual stuff is there. It's everything is there. And there's even some moments, like when she sort of initially wakes up from like the dream and, you put a dream in a movie, that's fucking lame because like, right. Like you scared me for no reason. And that's my reaction initially every time that happens. But then in this movie, when that happens, I was like, oh, that's fucking lame. And then she does it like 40 more times and like turns it into, and makes it a thing where it wasn't a cheap thing. It's actually now experimental and it's actually now trying to represent a fucking peyote trip, which like good luck with that. I mean, that's one of those like it's actually now doing so many other things. But she gave you that moment at first to be like, oh, that's kind of lame, which you wouldn't feel in an otherwise lame movie. The only reason why you would tag that as lame is because everything else has been so sharp up to that moment. And then she's like, ha, got you again. And she takes that thing and uses craft and uses, intellectualism and creativity and goes in a whole other direction. And now this lady has like a perfect eagle scar. And I'm just like, fuck yeah, she does. That makes perfect sense. And like, the movie works on every possible level that a movie can work. I was very, very impressed. Anyway.
Love it.
Revenge 2017. I got to learn how to get tighter about these things. My recommendations are always 15 minutes long while I tell you about my mother. Anyway.
You're fine.
Great movie.
Alex, the Miss 45 4K UHD from Arrow Video is out on Tuesday, October 28th. I have my review copy. I have watched it. I got to watch the movie for this on that disc. It's beautiful. You did a fabulous job. Your audio commentary is mwah. Chain Reactions is in theaters now, and the 1000 Women in Horror documentary hits Shudder later this year, yes?
No date yet, but coming soon.
No date yet. Coming soon on Shudder. Keep an eye out. Where can people follow you on social media?
I'm on Instagram as Horror Nonna and on Blue Sky as Horror Nonna as well.
Very good. I'm Jason Bailey on Blue Sky and Letterboxd. Mike, where can people find you?
I joined Letterboxd after making fun of it for as long as it's existed because now Jason has made me do so many podcasts that I have dumb fucking thoughts on every movie I watch.
Yay!
So I joined Letterboxd as Michael Hull, and it's been a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be.
Of course. It's
people talking about movies. Like nobody's there, like, talking about the state of fucking everything else and how terrible it is. We can just go there. I've really enjoyed having like a nice 30-minute oasis of Letterboxd. So thanks, Jason.
You're welcome, Mike. If you like the show and think other people might like it too, please do leave us a rating and or review on your podcatcher of choice. If you'd like to join our mailing list to get weekly show notes and links to things we reference, you can do that at buttondown.email/Film Fanatic. If you'd like to make a donation to support us in the show, you can do that at ko-fi.com/FunCitySounds. And if you're one of those strange people who likes to watch people recording a podcast, find us on YouTube on our channel Guide for the Film Fanatic.
Our humblest thanks to our guiding light, Mr. Danny Perry, author of Guide for the Film Fanatic. And shout out to executive producer Blake Howard. I told Blake that we were trying to get more women guests on the show, and he said the strangest thing in response. He said, all women do is laugh and sing and say the word pussy. You ask any doctor, he'll tell you that.
Thank you again, Alex.
On that note, my pleasure. Always a treat.
Alex, you got to give us a little bit of singing or else the quote's not going to make sense.
Nah, you're on your own, mate.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Jason.
And thank you for listening. On the next Guide for the Film Fanatic, author and filmmaker Scout Tafoya joins us to discuss Anthony Mann's The Naked Spur. It's a lively conversation. Don't miss it.